Welcome everyone for the second version of this live stream. The first one we had this text slightly clipped. Need to check earlier next time, always a live stream, one small thing each time. Hope the audio still survived. So I wanted to give a short introduction to some most important Unix command line utilities, the most important stuff in my opinion that you should know for your everyday automation workflow and such. And you may have seen either from the products we're doing, exact scan with scanner drivers, or other, if you follow me on Instagram for example, I recently have been at a scanner vendor reverse engineering more scanner driver details because it's what we do, already supporting 500 scanners. And so that is what I've done for 20 years, also off and on every other month with some detail here and there. So while we already support so many scanner drivers, we still sometimes need to reverse engineer latest protocol changes, and sometimes they also make major revisions for some new series, just like NVIDIA CPUs. If there's a major new technology series, architecture, something, then there are sometimes more changes than less. And this time, usually I can support a new scanner in a day or two. This time, for this high-end scanners, I travel there because I don't like shipping the 6,000–7,000 euro scanners very much. And so this time, sitting there in the conference room, in 48 hours I couldn't get this to work because it just changed too much. And I wanted to show you a couple of details how to work efficiently with logs of all kinds, be this normal web server logs or data logs from traces from USB, PCI, and fun stuff like this. And to take a look at this, so here are some fresh captures of those USB traces that we use for reference. I need to be a little bit careful, so this is neither a paid advertisement nor endorsement nor whatsoever. Also fun fact, so people ask me here on Instagram, nice photos, I like it, but why do I do this right at the vendor? So as I said, don't like shipping this expensive scanner so much. Office is already full with vintage and retro stuff and other scanners. And then last but not least, often the partners do not even have those details, even their European distribution channels at the vendors themselves, like this AAA brands, because the headquarters just not giving it out. And then also, so they then some higher level technicians, they even figured out that they would have had some documentations internally to maybe get, but they would need a really official NDA from me. And I'm not the greatest fan of NDAs for also many reasons. We have signed extremely few NDAs over the years. And while this was in general much appreciated, his effort there to help me, I was not the very most, like in the back, of course I said, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe we can try this, but I was actually at the back of my mind, I was thinking, yeah, and after avoiding NDAs, non-disclosure agreements for 20 years, it's maybe not the best thing now to sign one after we already spent so much efforts to reverse engineer all of those protocols anyway. So fun fact, so while I was there for 48 hours, this NDA did not, because it was like, this was like real official procedure with their factory overseas and such, that in this 48 hours this didn't come through. And also, so I didn't even get the NDA yet. I didn't sign something, I didn't even see the NDA yet. And in the meantime, so a couple of more, like 2 weeks are gone. Now I'm sitting here with the scanner already, and I still have not heard again from this NDA and technical documentation. And in the meantime, I have to say thanks, but in the meantime, I don't need it anymore because I reversed each and nearly, well, at least all the bits I need to know. I fully reversed to understand the meaning of all those bits and pieces. So thanks, but no thanks, no, I don't need this NDA anymore. Which again, also signing so many NDAs, which we thankfully haven't, except maybe with Apple, also limits me. I always need to think, can I say this or that, this, that or the other. So Coming to these traces look like this, but so these are this kind of hex numbers. I'm staring them for hours and trying to figure out what's happening there. And often these protocols do not change so much. So often you see already here this number pattern, and this is this command, and this and that. Just at this time they changed a lot, like much more than they usually do. And also here, but this data can look similar even if you trace PCI, NVIDIA, AMD, Apple details, USB, Firewire, Thunderbolt, you name it. Also virtualization stuff like PCIe pass-through and all these kinds of fun stuff. So it doesn't really matter. What only matters is that you have some hex numbers, some traces of whatsoever, and we likely will continue another month with the NVIDIA RSX on the P3 anyway. So you have some data, and I wanted to show you the most important Unix commands. That let's see if this time they are also fully visible, not that we live stream this again without being fully on the screen. So because why do I say this? I've seen so often from all over the world, from Taiwan to Florida to Silicon Valley, wherever, or Berlin, doesn't matter. I've seen so many, especially Windows programmers, because they are just not used to all those command line tools, how much help and fast automation and workflow this allows. So let's say you want to embed this into your program. Of course you can't. So what I've seen people doing, they want to embed here some packet, like whatever the packet might be, and they want to embed this into their C program or C++ or Ruby or Java, Python, Lua, you name it, and they start copy and pasting this to some file and then editing their hex prefixes, maybe even with search in place, and then maybe search in place the spaces even in Visual Studio, and at least put there some commas and zero hex. But then of course it's often not so easy in Visual Studio and such. You are often still left with editing some that you didn't, maybe you matched all the spaces there in the center, but not all of those. So with Unix tools this is super easy. And so how do we do this? For example, to add there the spaces, we can substitute, so we could start substituting similar to Visual Studio, so SED streaming editor, and then substitute some match like space to hex 0, maybe even comma something, and globally would look something like this. This would be something that you could easily also do with Visual Studio, but you see, first of all, you didn't substitute everything in the beginning, and you don't have commas at the end, and you have here some stray stuff because there were spaces. So this is not ideal. So how can we do this? So there's also TR. TR is translate, and basically TR is a super simple, well, it's just translate A to B, super simple. And basically everything you can do. I think I live streamed this unlisted, what a fail. I really start to hate YouTube. So TR is a super lightweight command, translate A to B, and you can even type it like A to B. What this would translate each A to B. What we would want to is delete all spaces like this, and then maybe violate it, delete also all new lines. And what this allows is that we get here one long string that we much easier can substitute again with the same hexing that we had earlier, just that now we get this completely perfect when we match each two occurrences of everything to 0 hex, ampersand is a match, comma, and voila. That is what usually you can't get as easily with other normal UI editors. And then if we want to fold this nicely, this command conveniently called fold with a width, usually like 80 columns or something. That doesn't help us here so much, so we use it with a width of something like, so we have 4, 5, we have 6 hex plus a comma in the space, 6 times 8 bytes, and voila, we have this completely nicely edited, folded here for copy and pasted. And of course, if I don't explain this here on YouTube, I type this here in 10 seconds or something. And in my opinion, this kind of commands are the most important stuff. Certainly with probably DD for grabbing blocks of data, input-output file with some megabyte here and there. And yeah, TR, SED certainly. So everything you can do with TR you can also do with SED. So for example, get rid of all the spaces would be substitute all spaces to nothing globally. Just that you can't, why I use TR for simple things is that some things are not as easy with SED, for example for new lines, because SED streaming editor always operates on a line basis. You would need to hold this pattern in the hold buffer and then join it together, which is rather complex and error prone. This is why for substituting new lines, I usually like delete new lines, use TR just for the simplicity. And yeah, this is just what we had before, just with an example that you can use SED for most of those stuff. And then also you can also use, instead of the slash here, in the early days, in the first months, I used SED like 20 years ago, 1998, 1996. I thought you always need to use slash, but you can also use any other character here. For example, if you have a lot of passes to substitute, then of course it's annoying to escape all the passes with a backslash, and this is why it's of course much easier to read this than with escaped backslash passes here. If you would to have it do it like that, of course much easier to read with a comma or any other character, you name it. Actually, I think probably let's try if something like xwork substitute just for the fun to nothing globally would be this. Yeah, this works. So really probably nearly every character works. Of course, most commonly used are comma, or in GNU autoconf you also see often @ for example, if you also type it correctly. You can also replace grep, like searching for something. Of course, grep is super trivial. Grep for 24, search for the string in this file. And for example, often you don't have all the tools, and if you work with something, like if you have already 20 expressions with SED, with a streaming editor, then of course it's easier to just use SED for everything instead of grep. Also, sometimes like on embedded systems, like the T2 init.rd for bringing up the Linux kernel while booting with Linux, you may not have all the tools like grep, and in the T2 init.rd we do everything with SED to have just one tool and not all the others. So to grep with SED would be substitute N for not print by default, and then match 24 and P for print. And this matching here takes any command, so print would be 1. You can also, for example, another would be quit, so then on the first, quit, then on the first occurrence it would quit. This is helpful if you have a gigabyte log file and want to stop after the first match of something. That would be quit. You can also write to a file or read a file. You can also, when you match 24, read a file with R and this kind of stuff. And you can also do the reverse. If you want to delete everything with 24, this would be match here 24 and then D for delete. For example, if we double check this here with an 11, then match 11 here, all those 11s we have, and now all those lines with 11s are gone because we matched 11 and then command delete. One super nice thing, so of all the commands, of course, many people know TR for translate. Also, what TR is usually used is translate, for example, all lowercase to all uppercase, for example. This also works with translate if you use it like that. And for example, here you see no capital E, but I usually use it to squash spaces like multiple occurrences of this or delete, this kind of stuff. And again, you can do everything with SED, just a streaming editor, just that. Sometimes TR is also handy. Then other useful things. So the other useful things that you may not have known is fold that I showed you there before to fold this to 80 or any other width. Another super nice thing that you may, probably even if you are an expert and do a lot of this stuff, you may not have used is paste. For example, you ended up with multiple command logs of whatever, USB, PCI, you name it, and you see I have, so I had this here already in some C code and I pasted this out again, so this is like copy and pasted from the editor. Then I also saved here this stuff to format scripts. You see it's always handy to have, then if you work on something for a day or two, have 1 or 2 scripts where you saved those commands that you regularly use. And I wanted to compare those commands to see what is actually the difference if you just stare on them. Like this is sometimes hard to see, especially if they are longer. Like a longer one would be here, this 2 for example. You see also like this. You see the first one was of course smaller. There it is easier to see changes, but the longer the data becomes, the more you want to automate this and not manually compare this. And for this I ended up formatting this here nicely, all of them here to 1 hex number per line. Just with SED, likely is this format 2 script or something or one of those, or with some additional SED at the end. So I have all those text files here are 1 hex value per line. And to have this next to each other for comparison is, for example, like this. And also here this file name expansion that other people were already wondering in earlier live streams of mine, that are here with curlies. This is just a normal shell expansion of variables and file name globbing. So all of those files that are prepared and then paste is adding those columns next to each other. That looks like, also if you type it without typos, like a type symbol. So this, each of those columns here is one of those text files, and paste adds them one to another. Very useful command that I only found after a couple of years using Linux, certainly probably around 2000 or something like that. As you see, super useful command, and then you can much easier compare different packets. You see the beginning of those packets here is the same, and then some light variations start to occur. And that combined, for example, with diff, I also have here more files, so gtext, so this, of course, you can add here 1 column after the other. And another thing that I then use to compare this kind of things already here is diff, usually of course used to create patches for source files, but I use diff for literally everything. This, like, I probably, well, beside running a shell and maybe SED, diff is for sure the 3rd or 4th most used command of mine. I use it for everything, not only to send patches upstream and other fun stuff, but I literally diff all the raw data that I ever, for example, with the P3 RSX, if I have the commands, graphic commands in the queue, I would probably log them out. I had this code there already in the driver, so you can use this for everything. And then you log, for example, you want to debug a hang of your GPU, you log all the commands that you submit to your ring buffer or command buffer of your GPU, and then you have multiple runs similar to this USB data, just like GPU packets of commands that you saw in my videos, S3, Verge, Voodoo and stuff, all those similar commands. And then you can just diff it right like this. And I recommend diff-u for Unicode because I don't find this old-fashioned patch formats too helpful or too readable. Although this is also relatively readable here with this less and greater going in and out. However, there's also this extremely old-fashioned format that would be, what would that be, even add format or output in add script. Yeah, so I've seen people sending this add format, and this is really horrible in my opinion. Don't do this to people. In my opinion, not the most readable. And even this other medium new format, not the most amazing. I like this context stuff, not only to review source code when I get this, send it to people, receive it for stuff. If you send something to me, please always unify diff, that is the most amazing. And then you have some context here with those lines starting with space and then the minus and plus for lines being deleted and being then added, and then you usually see here this number changed 05 to 02 in this trace, and similar stuff like that. And of course you can pair this off with all kinds of other processing, with all the scripts that you want to add. Of course I have complete Lua programs to decode all those packets, but if there is a new protocol, completely new kind of protocol stuff used in whatever you're using, GPUs, Wi-Fi cards, network cards, sound cards, all whatever you're tracing, reverse engineering, USB serial and this kind of fun stuff, then you usually start from nothing and not with a huge collection of Lua dissecting kind of program stuff. But yeah, this was what I wanted to share as a brief introduction of the most important programs, starting from TR for translate, SED for the streaming editor, and then in other use cases DD. What does it stand even for? I mean, some of the names convert or copy a file. So what? So because CC was taking the name to DD, I guess, or something like this sort. And DD, of course, for like cutting blocks, like beginning and in the middle of huge data of whatever, megabyte here or there, often like file systems, like dumping your PS3 volumes and fun stuff like that. SED, in other cases also GNU-org, which I don't use as much anymore, Perl, Python, Lua, but otherwise SED is amazing, and diff certainly, and then fold and paste and all of this kind of stuff. In my opinion, never start hand editing like I showed you here in the beginning. I see this nearly every day or something, people hand editing. What if I cut it something? Yeah, basically never ever hand edit. If you start hand editing something that requires more like 10 edits, go to a terminal and automate this, and in my opinion, that's amazing. Let's see, comments in the audience. After we wanted to learn Vim, but someday I should go on college for that. Welcome, Detard. So I hope you learned something. Sorry, or well, actually I'm sorry for my time mostly that I had to restream this after my first live stream didn't have the command on the visible capture space here. I hope this time everything was readable. I hope you learned something. I don't go too much more into detail because I spent, you know, like nearly a 40-hour week on reversing the scanner protocol, and if I would tell you more detailed what these numbers do, then I would help our few and little competitors. So certainly I don't want to help them to what these new scanners are doing. So forget these numbers. Search your own numbers. Don't code and reverse engineer every day. It's amazing and lots of fun. And everyone can do this, you know, even if you don't know programming, if you're interested in the PS3, PS4, Nintendo, what is the latest, Switch or whatever, or some Bluetooth remote or Internet of Shit kind of devices, just capture something, look at the numbers, start to make sense out of this, and you don't need to go to college to learn something. Everyone can learn their stuff, especially if it's fun and whatever and usable for you because you want to use something like an SGI Octane or SGI O2 or stuff like that. And thanks for looking up why DD, but my guess from copy and convert, that is so often like something you would name the CC for copy and convert, and then CC is already taken, and this is why you name it then DD. There, Unix is full of this kind of jokes. But thanks for looking this up. That this is IBM JCL command, which stands for data definition, which I always thought it would mean data duplicate, though. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, you don't wonder too much for a decade until you want to pronounce it on YouTube. And if you have questions to any of those sorts, we certainly should continue here soon with the PS3, with fun stuff on the RSX, now that I have figured out all the bits and pieces. Also, a fun fact, this protocol wasted a couple of hours more than it should, because some stuff in the middle, so some stuff was familiar and not too different. Also, I really wonder what those scanner vendors are doing. Actually, can change the view here maybe. Also, this is unsharp because why should this focus? Maybe it's focusing on the display, I guess. Also, then I move and then it's not focused anymore, but whatever. And I also wonder a little bit, this is why this is not, I didn't show the scanner brand. This is not an endorsement, not a paid advertisement. I will not name the scanner vendor intentionally, not only for our competition to have an easy game here and learn from our reverse engineering. Also, I don't want to criticize those vendors because we have pretty good relations. Although you see, they let us reverse engineer. Even in Russia, I was reverse engineering some scanner in a conference room, and in Moscow, and yeah, there in Germany, and even there, also UK, by the way. So basically, wherever I go, usually I end up reverse engineering something in some conference room. That is a recurring running gag. And mostly I wonder, actually, but the scanner vendors know this. I usually tell them, at least some of them, some of those protocols, by the way, are better. Some of those protocols are worse. And sometimes I really wonder why the vendors change the protocol so much, because sometimes it's not even for the better. Often I find this rather useless. Mostly it's only causing a lot of work for us, reverse engineering, re-implementing, getting it to all work again. And this is also why with 500 scanner drivers, in the meantime, there's always, you change some detail for some scanner and then you might break a scanner from 2 years ago because you fix a bug or use a new feature, and then with some too old scanner it doesn't work because it doesn't yet understand this protocol bit, and the number was different for whatsoever reason, or a little bit annoying. In my opinion, I would do this a little bit differently, but who asks me? This is why we now do YouTube videos, to educate the next generation of developers not to repeat all kind of mistakes, because some of those protocols are not the most amazing. And again, I don't quite get why the vendors change so much. Again, often it's not for benefit of anything. For example, one scanner vendor completely rewrote their protocol, so they used for 20 years, they used the same protocol. Well, more or less, of course, every year they added a little bit, but it all made like sense. Like they added to like reversed, there were reversed fields, and they added new bits to reversed fields, or they also sometimes they just enlarged the command buffer, so all the bits were the same, just like longer with a couple of new ones. That all made pretty much sense and was amazing. Nothing much to complain. And then after 20 years, the lead engineer or the team around the lead engineer or something there at the headquarters decided we need to rewrite the whole protocol. And so they basically changed the whole protocol and told me, yeah, and now it's much more amazing. But honestly, in my opinion, it's the same. It's actually like it's everything changed, but like only the packaging, the inside is still like quite similar. Like you had to reprogram everything. So we literally had to like write a new driver from scratch, like because all the structures were like changed, but like only on the outside, if that makes sense. Like instead it was green, now instead it was red, now it's blue, or something like that. If that makes sense. So like just like in another color a little bit. But so basically, but the meaning or like meaning of the structure was still the same. So they didn't fix any, even similar commands were still in similar order. They always told me, yeah, it avoids this bugs or makes that better. But in reality, in my opinion, it was still the similar number of commands, a similar sequence. It was basically everything still the same, just differently packed. In my opinion, it made zero sense. I sometimes wonder if the vendors do this intentionally to hurt external third-party vendors like us. Not that they would want to hurt us specifically. Again, we have pretty amazing, basically from all the not cheap, not no name, all the more mid to high level scanner vendors, I know them all, some more, some less, and I have good contacts to many of them. I often also tell them, please don't change this, or maybe you could do this different to make this better. Usually, like 99%, they never listen to me, because I should say this is why we need to educate, entertain on YouTube about such kind of stuff. But just to give you a little bit insight, yeah, it's a little bit strange with these changes. And this is also why I call out NVIDIA to release specification. Also, by the way, in my opinion, the scanner vendors could also release a specification, like they wanted an NDA from me that I still have not seen, and such kind of fun stuff. But yeah, I only didn't want to comment each of those bits, because when it's already not open, I don't want to help our competition. When I open it up, then at least they can pay me or something, license it from us, because it's amazing. Let's see, comments in the audience. Started in a virtualization environment on overt 3 nodes with Gluster or Gluster. Plan to visit, maybe we could have some fun with it. That sounds Fun, yeah. Still working on this details. Life is a little bit busy. Also wasted way more time than I wanted with this bloody scanner. And yeah, in my opinion, although this wasted now like 40 hours of my time, in my opinion, there's nothing so new or groundbreaking, amazingly different that it warrants so much changes that, again, in my opinion, are not really that huge changes. But again, hope you learned something, especially from the commands. If you have any questions how to use something, always leave it in the comments below. I'm pretty sure me or others are happy to help you out. And I hope you learned something from this command. Oh, by the way, I'm not the greatest fan of VI. This might start a flame war. So I only know the basic. No, I need to bless myself. I only know the basic VI editing, although I use it quite a bit. But fun fact, I have quite some. You have seen me use both VI and Emacs, which probably is hilarious given how much flameverse it starts. So actually, for all the small editing, usually like T2 scripting, like small text edit changes on T2 or similar Unix files, I usually use VI, and I only know some basic VI stuff. Oops, nearly throw the water over. Yeah, like deleting, inserting, and reading a file, and enabling the ruler. Or usually, fun fact, I usually even use often NVI, some more old-fashioned original VI, not the big Vim, this other Vim thing that is as huge as Emacs. And for all the huge editing, like serious source code, I actually use Emacs, or actually I'm still stuck with X-Emacs because 2 decades ago in 1998, X-Emacs was much more amazing. Emacs sucked big times. This is why I use X-Emacs since 20 years. And I use here some, I don't have it on the screen. I use some beta version, although it's not the most amazingly maintained, which is why I'm actually thinking, oops, this was Firefox, it was super clever. I'm actually thinking whether to switch to something, maybe I even write my own editor with my own UI runtime thing, because reasons. And so I use some beta because there were not really many releases of X-Emacs. Even this is already probably a decade old. This is compiled 2017, but whatever, I guess it's a decade old. I use this beta, so I'm running on a beta version since a decade, for the reason that this is an anti-aliased version, and this is why otherwise the non-beta version doesn't have anti-aliasing, and it's getting a little bit on my nerves. Otherwise, I like this look and feel of X-Emacs still, although it's a decade old. I still like it more than Emacs, which may or maybe I have or may not have. Actually, I have it. Ah, yeah, right. I had to install it. So nowadays, but a decade ago, Emacs sucked big times. Of course, nowadays it's also quite okay, but I'm still more used to X-Emacs. But maybe one day, maybe I write my own editor just for. Actually, fun fact: I already started my own editor. Here let's go to my portable runtime where I have all this fun stuff. And I actually have here an editor testbed, which right now is only some more or less empty shell for my text view testing. We can also load here something like let's maybe load user source T2 trunk script function. And so this is some, it already has here some nice gutter. I like this 80-colon gutter thing from Xcode. Not so many editors have this, I guess. I really like this. So this is already some halfway, a little bit working stuff, already not so slow. You see a little bit snappy. But for this, because our UI is written in Lua, and so all the UI stuff is actually Lua scripted, which in my opinion is amazing, similar to Lightroom or many games. And because this is in Lua, actually I had to optimize it quite a bit. When I had the first trial implementation, it wasn't text scrolling as fast, because all the text stuff here is, each character is handled with Lua, which is not the most performant if you're not just in time compiling it. And I optimized this quite a lot. So for a text view, if you write your own UI system and you write your own text view with all the text selection and fun editing. So editing already works here, right? For the most part anyway, even already with fancy selection, as you see here, all the basic stuff works. Just not the fancy stuff. This is just, for example, a lot of stuff takes a lot of work, like undo infrastructure and all this fancy highlighting, syntax highlighting, and other fun stuff, find, replace, and whatnot. But this already, because we use the UI stuff for exact scan, OCR-Kit on Windows and Linux, and theoretically have many other demonstration and proof of concept implementations, it improved our UI significantly, because you might ask, why did I even bother to start a proof of concept text editor to use our own UI, right? To eat our own dog food. And this, of course, as much as I had to optimize this for the text to be that fast, this optimized our whole UI system significantly. So all the text handling, this is basically only, the editor is not doing much, it's only instantiating a generic UI view. The only little bit hacky thing is it's instantiating here a second. So these are two views here for the line number and the text, and the line numbers. So this is actually not text objects, but this is dynamically generated. So this is virtual text in a text view, like subclassed, and only outputting the numbers on the fly. So yeah, this was a little bit tricky, but there you say this significantly improves your own text system and UI framework when you eat your own dog food and want to get stuff running. So yeah, I hope you learned something, and especially from the command stuff here. Let's quit this. I hope this was interesting, this kind of commands, how you, in my opinion, the best way. But if you have better ways, except maybe writing your own Python code, but in my opinion, wherever you are, you have those classic decade-old command line tools, and you can use it everywhere. If you travel somewhere, you do some security review or on-site work, embedded, whatever, debug something, you always have those tools around. So, and you see super snappily on a shell, you already are in a shell for whatsoever other reasons, and then you just mix and match your commands and substitution stuff there. Instead of using frameworks, you succeeded in life if you can get the same result with piping data instead of using frameworks. Sublime text is pretty nifty, live, so Atom, but yeah, Atom is super inefficient. So yeah, I don't even want to get started with Atom for all those whole browser engine kind of stuff already called. In my opinion, it is crazy to have a whole inefficient browser engine just for text editor, and then the blinking text editor is the text editor is already using 10% on a Core i7 just for blinking the text cursor, which is hilarious. On 386 could do this with 0 CPU load, and 2019 Atom text cursor blinking even is expensive with all the web HTML5 canvas text CSS and JavaScript fluff. Yeah, GNU, you love org if you mean GNU org, as in we still use org. I think most English people pronounce it in T2. So T2, how did I learn all those scripting? Of course, certainly in Rock Linux back in the day, scripting all the distribution, doing this. This is why we like shell scripting, building T2 so much. Why I find it naturally to script all this package configuration, like our love and hate relationship with Rust and Cargo and Firefox, and also regular GCC makefile and stuff, because you normally would make install it here on the terminal. I find this the most natural thing to script build system and distribution. And we also have org stuff in here for quite some more extensive processing. Although for some fancy stuff we actually switched to Lua. Fun fact, because the config was also shell script, and this is already, so actually today it's quite fast, but 15 years ago it became really slow, the configuration. And then I think Clifford Wolf, the creator of Work Linux probably wrote a C plugin for shell for bash to accelerate this, and instead of like GNU-org and SED and stuff. And then of course it was faster, and we used the C plugin quite some years, but eventually we used Lua for quite some stuff, and then I rewrote, so we are not using this hard-coded C bash plugin anymore. This is why when you build the config here, the Lua bash accelerator will be built. This is a Lua bash plugin that we invented instead of the previous legacy proprietary C plugin to bash, and this allows us to do the stuff with Lua that we have previously done with GNU-org. Although we still have some GNU-org in there, but never change a running system. I grabbed this already. There is some GNU-org in there, but I was thinking to replace it with Lua, which in my opinion is much easier to read and maintain, but never change a running system. But that is probably a story for another day. This is why I don't touch what is working right now. I have too many other stuffs to do, and except Rust and Cargo, which are annoying. But even rewriting stuff in Lua or org or whatever does not make Rust and Cargo more amazing. So it stays how it is right now, but that's for discussion for another live stream. My wife called. I probably should go home, and you should too, unless it's your day and you should go to work. So good night, bonsoir, and thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. If you have questions and answers, always leave them below, and I hope to see you soon for all the next videos and live streams to come.